Hi, Sumit. Welcome back to my channel. It's Needles by Tiara here. And on today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make a basic sleeve. So we're going to be drafting a long sleeve and a short sleeve. So with me, I have my pattern well laid out, the longer pattern for the long sleeve and the shorter pattern for the short sleeve. So now we're going to be starting with our long sleeve first. So ensure that your pattern paper is on fold or your fashion fabric is on fold. So the folded part of your pattern paper should be facing you. Having done that, now go ahead to roll out a straight line at that point. So having rolled out your straight line at that point, now we'll move ahead to impute the rest of our measurements. So placing our tape from the sleeve starting point line, we'll go ahead to mark the distance between our sleeve starting line to our elbow point. Having done that, we'll go ahead to mark the distance between that point to our wrist point. So with that being said, now we'll go in with our straight ruler and we'll roll out that point into each other to form a straight line. So having done that, we'll go ahead to label our pattern. So this is my sleeve starting point line, which is this. And this point right here is my elbow point. So I'll go ahead to label this part to be my elbow point. And now lastly, this is my wrist point. Having done that, now placing our tape from our sleeve starting point line, we'll go ahead to impute our bicep point line. So you could use in between the value of 4 to 5 inches. So in this case, I'll be coming down at that point by 4.5 inches. So you could go ahead to use 5 inches or 4 inches. Now I'll go ahead to roll that point into each other to form a straight line. On that point, I'll go ahead to label this part to be my bicep point. Now, with that being said, bringing back our pattern for our bodysuit, I would go ahead to take the measurement on our armhole point line. So following the armhole curve, we'd go ahead to take the measurements that we have on this point. So I have a total of 10.25 as my round armhole. So I'll go ahead to, fold my tape into two to get the full circumference. So my full circumference is 20.5 inches. So now remember that our pattern paper is on fold. So we're going to be dividing that measurement into two, meaning we're going to be marking half of that measurement. So 20.5 divided by 2 would give me 10.25. So on your bicep point line, go ahead to chalk down that value at that point. Now with the aid of your straight ruler, connect from that point all the way down to the point to the bicep point that you imputed your armhole circumference divided by 2. So this is basically what I'm doing for this point. Having done that, placing your tape from your sleeve starting point line to your bicep point line, go ahead to fold your tape into two to find the midpoint. Go ahead to chalk down your midpoint at that point. Now with the aid of your curve ruler, we're going to be making out a curve from that point all the way down to that midpoint and extensively down to our bicep point line. So please pay attention to the way my curve ruler is being placed at this point and do go ahead to replicate it. So now we'll go ahead to make our first curve all the way down to that midpoint this way. So now we're going to be blending from that point all the way down to our bicep point this way. So like I said, please ensure that your curve ruler is being placed exactly the same way mine is being placed at this point. So go ahead to blend that point all the way in. And now the next thing we'll proceed on to doing is to get the measurement of our bicep point. So the measurement we imputed on our bicep point was our round armhole circumference. So we're going to be taking that measurement. So mine was 10.25. I'll go ahead to follow out the curve that we just marked to get the value of that 10.25. So having done that, this is mine for this point, and I've gone ahead to chalk it down. Now, like I said, you're going to be taking that measurement on the curvy point and not on the straight point line. Now to my elbow point, you'd go ahead to divide your client's elbow circumference by 2, and of course you'd go ahead to chalk it down at that point. Lastly, on your wrist, you'd go ahead to divide your client's wrist circumference by 2. Mine was 7.5 inches divided by 2 would give me 3.75. So having done that, I would go ahead to impute that value at that point, which is this. Now, before we go ahead to connect all these points into each other to form a straight line, remember that we've not added all our basic allowances. So at this point, you go ahead to, add your allowances. So placing my tape from my wrist point, I'll be coming down with the value of 2 inches, which will serve as my sleeve folding allowance. So go ahead to come down by 2 inches at that point, and now go in with your straight ruler to connect all the points into each other to form a straight line. Now we'd go ahead to label our pattern. So this is our allowance, our folding allowance. And now whatever you have imputed at your wrist point, take it down to your sleeve folding allowance point. Now on the side, remember that we've not added all our basic allowances. So on that point, I'll go ahead to impute 1 inch on my biceps, 1 inch at my elbow, 1 inch on my wrist point, and lastly 1 inch on my sleeve folding allowance. Now with the aid of my straight ruler, I'll go ahead to blend in that point connecting from my biceps to my elbow to my wrist and extensively down to my sleeve folding allowance. So you can see that our straight ruler cannot accommodate all the points. So we're going to be taking this bit by bit. So connect from your bicep to your elbow point, and now from your elbow to your wrist point. So if you've watched this video to this point, what are you waiting for? Kindly click on the subscription button, like, share and comment for more of this. Having done that, we'll go ahead to extend from our wrist point line all the way into our sleeve folding allowance point this way. So go ahead to blend in that point. We do not want any sharp edge at any given point. So with this being done, we'll go ahead to take out the excesses that we have on all the points. Now going in with our scissors, we'll go ahead to take out this point this way. So please just watch the way I'm going about this process and do go ahead to replicate. Same for yours. So having done that, now we'll go ahead to reintroduce our curve ruler and we'll be blending that point all the way in. Now go in with your scissors again and go ahead to cut out the excesses, following out the curved lines that we have on that point. So you're going to be following out your armhole curve at this point and not the straight point of your line. I hope you understand. And voila, our long sleeve is ready. So look at how beautiful and perfect this came out. Look at the curve points, the armhole curve. Look at how it's sitting pretty. And look at how the sides blend and connect perfectly to the downside of our sleeve. So you can see how beautiful and how perfect this came out. All the basic allowances, which was 1 inch, and extensively the 2 inches we did add rather for our folding allowance. So with this being said, we'll go ahead to keep this aside and we'll be working on the short sleeve. So this is my pattern for my short sleeve and I've gone ahead to fold it into 2, just like we did with the long sleeve. And this is the folded part of our short sleeve. So with that being said, we'll go ahead to roll out a straight line on that point, which will serve as our sleeve starting point line. Having done that, we'll go ahead to place our tape from our sleeve starting point line, and of course we'll go ahead to mark out the length of our short sleeve. So my elbow point is going to be the full length of my short sleeve, which is definitely what I'm marking down at this point. So whatever the value of yours is, just go ahead to impute that value on this point. Having done that, now we're going with our straight ruler, connecting all the points into each other to form a straight line. So with that being done, we'd go ahead to label our pattern. So this is my sleeve starting point line. And lastly, this is my elbow point line, which will be my short sleeve full length. So with that being done, go ahead to place your tape from your sleeve starting point line and you'll be chalking down 4.5 inches, 4 inches or 5 inches at this point. So for my bicep point, I placed my tape from my starting line and I came down by 4.5 inches. Now with the aid of my straight ruler, I'll be rolling that point into each other to form a straight line. And now I'll go ahead to label my pattern. So this point is my bicep point line. With that being done, bringing back the drafted pattern of our bodysuit, I'll go ahead to measure out the round armhole circumference imputed at my armhole point line. So following out the curve with my tape, I'll go ahead to check out whatever I have as that value. So keeping this aside, I had the total value of 10.25. I would go ahead to fold my tape into 2 and that would give me 20.5 inches. So with that being said, remember that our pattern paper is on fold. So we're going to be marking half of that measurement. which is 20.5 divided by 2, and that would give me 10.25. So on my biceps point line, I'll go ahead to impute my round armhole circumference divided by 2. And now with the aid of my straight ruler, I'll be connecting from my sleeve starting point line all the way down to my biceps this way. So having done that, placing your tape on that line from your sleeve starting point all the way down to your biceps point, you'd go ahead to find the midpoint of that line by folding your tape into two, which is exactly what I'm doing at this point. Go ahead to fold your tape into two and chalk down the midpoint. With that being done, we'll go ahead to reintroduce our curve ruler, and we'll be connecting from that point all the way down here and extensively down to your biceps point. So please at this point, pay attention to how my curve ruler is being placed and do go ahead to replicate same. Ensure it touches your sleeve starting point and all the way down to the midpoint or upper curve. Now for our lower curve, we're going to be placing our curve ruler from that point, and we'll be extending that point all the way down to our biceps point. So pay attention to how my curve ruler is being placed at this point, and do go ahead to replicate same for yours. So we've gotten the curve for the lower part, so we'll go ahead to blend this point all the way. So now remember on your biceps point, we did imputed our client's round armhole circumference divided by 2 on that point. So now mine was 10.25 having divided it by 2. So we're going to be following out the curve to impute that value or to get that value. So placing my tape from that point, I'll go ahead to follow out the curves that I have on this point all the way down here to get the total value of 10.25 being my armhole circumference divided by 2. So I've gone ahead to impute that value at that point. So like I said, you're going to be following out this curve to get that value of your round armhole circumference divided by 2, which mine is this point. Now at my elbow point being my short sleeve length, I'll go ahead to divide my round elbow circumference by 2, and whatever I have as the value, I'll go ahead to impute it on my elbow point, which is this. So now before we go ahead to connect all these points into each other, now remember that we've not added all our basic allowances, so we're going to be adding all our allowances at this point. Placing my tape from my elbow point, I'll go ahead to chalk down 2 inches, which will be my folding allowance. Now going with your straight ruler and connect all those points into each other to form a straight line. So having done that, whatever you have imputed at your elbow point, take it down to your folding allowance point this way. Now before we go ahead to connect those points into each other to form a straight line, remember that that was the value we have on that point, around armhole divided by 2. We're going to be imputing 1 inch at that point. On our elbow point as well, we'd go ahead to impute 1 inch, and lastly on our folding allowance point, we'd go ahead to impute 1 inch as well. Now we're going with our straight ruler to connect all those points into each other to form our basic sleeve curve. So we'd go ahead to extend from our elbow point line all the way down to our folding allowance point line this way. Now with that being said, we'd go in with our scissors and we'd go ahead to cut out following all the points. So with this being done, our short sleeve is ready. So you can see how beautiful our armhole curve aligns and blends all the way into our biceps points. You could see the sides, the curves on all the parts. This is perfect and this is very beautiful. So this is the end result you'd certainly come out with if you follow through the process, and of course you've gotten it right. Look at how perfect and how beautiful our long and our short sleeve came out looking like. This is a must try for every fashion designer. As a beginner, if you have issues with drafting your basic sleeve, this is definitely a must try technique. With this sleeve drafting technique, trust me when I say you can never get it wrong. So with that being said, we're going to flip this to the back side of it and we'll go ahead to label our pattern. So with my marker, I'll go ahead to label my pattern. So this is my long sleeve, which is this. And lastly, this is my short sleeve, which is this. So with this being done, we've come to the end of our basic sleeve drafting tutorial. Please hit on the subscription button, like, share and follow for more of this related content. Thank you and see you on my next video. Bye!